can't see which one.
Right there. And if you look here, okay, we see, we can stay here, we see how government grew. In 1983, when Governor Branstad came in, and he talks about how Governor Culver assigned the largest budgets in Iowa history. By the way, this chart, the source is David Vaught, auditor of Iowa. In 2009, he created this chart. This was before former Governor Branstad re-entered the race. But in 1983, here's where state government is. And we see state government continually increase all the way up to 1999. Now, we see it actually dip some, although the revenues didn't match the expenditures under the Vilsack administration because he spent a lot of reserves. But then under Governor Culver, it just takes off again. Now this is Secretary of Vaught's, State Auditor Vaught's chart. This isn't our data. So we have to understand what's happened with state government. And unlike the Branstad administration, we don't say we cut state government when we grow state government. We show how we clearly reduce state government. So you can wipe this chart out, and let's go to the fiscal facts. Can we go to the fiscal facts file?
See, it's hard for me to see everything as close as you are.
Sure. There we are. And let's go to page 34.
Actually, this is not the one we want.
That's the document.
Hold on. Help if I can see what I'm doing. Hold on. I had it up, and it's in here. There it is, right there. Okay. Which one do you want?
34. And if we can enlarge this chart here, 40 cents out of every dollar spent in terms of all government expenditures spent in health and human services. So the first thing we talk about doing is fixing health and human services. And again, this is linked to the federal government. Most people think education is the largest expenditure, government expenditure in our state. Education is the largest expenditure in the general fund. And in fact, let's bring up, it should be right at the beginning, let's bring up that chart. I think it's this chart. Education consumes the lion's share of our general fund appropriations. So we see where education, K-12 consumes this and other education consumes that. So it's the single largest chunk of our state appropriations. But it's not the largest chunk. And scroll up a little because I want to contrast the amount of money, or when push this up. So we're, here $5.768 billion. We can get rid of this. So that's clearly the largest expenditure in the state fund. But now we go to this chart here, and let's enlarge this. And it's not just that human services consumes 40.4% of all government expenditures, but let's push this up. But it's pull it out. But there's significantly more money that we spend at all levels of government. So we begin fixing state government by fixing human services. Now we also reduce the cost of education spending, which we talked about in our education reform plan, and you can see that online. And we also touch on fixing the criminal justice system. So for tonight's presentation, I'm going to focus just on DHS, and I'm going to focus on the correction system. Education, health and human services, and justice consume 90.4% of our general fund dollars and 77.2% of all government spending. human services being the largest portion of that. So the key to us beginning the process of fixing health and human services, and if we don't fix DHS, we cannot fix state government, is to change the very way we structure leadership. Leadership in the past of state agencies has been determined by who's the best advocate. So maybe a person's a mental health expert or an early childhood advocate, and so they're put in charge of the department. The problem is that what does that person understand about all the other aspects of the department? If you put a mental health person in charge of DHS, for example, and let's go back over here and bring up our page 68 chart. We come over here. No, go down another one. One more. Blow this up. Now let's say that cool right there. Let's say we have someone who's a mental health expert. What does that person understand about running the $3 billion Medicaid program or the near $500 million supplemental nutrition assistance program? Maybe they know nothing about it. So a person who arguably ought to be the head of a division is put in charge of an entire department. And we've done this in area after area after area. When you're dealing with 9-figure bureaucracies or a multi-billion-dollar bureaucracy like DHS, you don't go get someone because they're a mental health expert that ran a local health program. You go get someone who understands how to run a multi-billion-dollar bureaucracy, or at least knows how to run a bureaucracy where they align mission with implementation. DHS is fundamentally linked to the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. From Reagan to Obama, from Branstad to Culver, from Chuck Palmer to Charles Krogmeyer, the mission has been to move folks from dependence to self-sufficiency. The problem is that the top never gets that message to the bottom. So while they're saying at the top we want to move folks from dependency to self-sufficiency, at the bottom we're increasing the number of folks on welfare, for example. So what we have to do is appoint leadership at the top that understands how to align mission with implementation. This is vital because the failure to do that costs taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. That's where we get the consultants, the 6-figure consultants, installing shelfware, not software, shelfware year after year after year, where they buy new programs and buy new programs, and they just keep their jobs as consultants year after year after year, for example. So we have to change the management paradigm in order to create efficiencies. Now, once we change the management paradigm or the management structure, we then begin the process of putting in place some core governing principles to restore both operational integrity and operational efficiency. Now, at this point, I shed a tear for my whiteboard and move on with the rest of my life. Operational integrity speaks to Lynn Walding writing a $1 million check from the Alcohol Bureau to his wife's best friend's husband 48 hours after giving him a no-bid contract. Operational efficiency speaks to an ambulance being called in Des Moines to go to Fort Dodge, to go to Iowa City, to come back to Des Moines, to go back to Iowa City, to go back to Fort Dodge, to come back to Des Moines. Now, I use this example all across the state, and interestingly enough, 2 days ago, I was in a small town and shared this example with a woman who said, "You got to go talk to my husband. He was an ambulance driver. He did that all the time." Operational efficiency speaks to you go to the state and you want to pay for something with a credit or debit card.